joining us. We are so excited. We have some great filmmakers going to have a fun conversation. This is going to be very casual, very fun, very free, a lot of sharing with creatives. So we first want to thank Imagine This for their festival and how they brought all these people together. So we're going to go ahead and get started and jump right into it. If everybody could go ahead and say your name and a little bit of information about your film, that would be great. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with Lachelle.
Oh, wow. Hot seat. My name is Lachelle Crisan. My film is One of the Guys. It's a short film about unraveling toxic masculinity in platonic male and female friendships, about 3 musical collaborators who just have like a chaotic kickback / studio session.
Jenny?
Hi, my short film is Dear Simone. It follows a strained relationship between 2 siblings that starts to transform when one of them starts secretly writing letters to the other. And as you know, the ruse leads to the reveal, it turns out there are more than one confession to be had.
I'll go next. Oh. Okay. Hello, my name is Loren Maxine. My film is Sincerely Your Friend, and Sincerely Your Friend is about a true story about a mental health, focused on mental health, about a young girl reading a letter out loud to her family and her friends, expressing her battles with mental health and what she'd like for everyone to know.
Great. Ayush, did you already go?
Oh, no, I didn't. So, hi guys, I'm Ayush, and I'm here on behalf of Kamathipura, which was written by Sneh Sapru. She's also here on the call. Hey, Sneh. And it's based on an anthology she's written called Magical Creatures of Mumbai's Underbelly. And this specific story is about a 20-year-old virgin man who goes into Mumbai's oldest brothel in search of a legendary seductress to make his first time special. And who he meets is actually this mythical creature who turns his first time entirely on its head into a terrifying supernatural ordeal.
Yes, it was very graphic, which I love. I love a graphic film. So that was great. Everybody had amazing films, by the way. I can't wait to get into this. And then Sneh, you work with Ayush, is that correct? You guys work together?
Yes, I do.
Perfect.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Yeah.
Welcome.
And I'm here. Yeah, and I'm here to watch the films. Ayush has already told you about the story, so I look forward to attending the panel discussion.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us. And then Wasim, we know you might not be able to come on camera, but if you just want to give us a little bit of info about your film. You're on mute. I know, it's Zoom.
It's about 12 o'clock in India, and I'm still running around driving, getting home and doing shit. So sorry about all of that. Ayush has told you about the story, but I'm the producer on the film. And all I want to say is that when I read Sneh's book, I was just blown away. And we were just very happy to have been able to make this film.
Great. Well, then I will be asking the general questions about working together as a team to your team. So that's going to be fun as we get into this. So the first thing I want to talk about is how this film really reached your vulnerability. I know as a filmmaker, that's the first thing that you're thinking about, right? Is like, what do I need to share? How do I share it? How do I get my voice out there? How did you overcome your vulnerability to get this done? Did you guys have any tips? Did anything come to mind? Or were you just ready? Like, this is what I need to say. I'd love to hear from you guys about this. And we can start with Jenny if you have anything off the top of yours.
Yeah, I mean, I think like any true story, you get to a point where it's more painful to keep it in than it is to express it. There's actually a really genius trauma therapist who talks about, like what is it? Hold on, I'm gonna get this right. What comes out of us doesn't make us ill. What stays inside us does. Dr. Edith Eger. And I think in terms of like expressing the vulnerability, like it is so nerve-wracking to kind of be the one holding that torch forward. But I think it's really, really noble work. And so at the end of the day, I think it's just it's a beautiful opportunity to create something that's going to resonate with people.
Did you feel nervous at all sharing your voice or the specific story, or were you just ready to get it out there? How did you feel?
Oh, no, I mean, it stays petrifying, let's be clear.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think, especially when it's something, my story was very loosely inspired by real events in my own life. And so you're always sort of towing that fine line between like, is this resonant or is it just self-indulgent? Like, at what point does this vulnerability become a story that actually has appeal to other people versus, well, this is just like my diary entry. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. No, it was great. I love the different scenes of just receiving the letter and going through that whole process. It was lovely. All right, Lachelle, coming over to you.
Yeah, so I actually wrote this script in a writer's group in the middle of lockdown, kind of just as like an exercise. And I started with this top line, log line of just wanting to explore friendships between men and women that are fully platonic. I haven't really seen that explored a lot on the screen. And often when you do see it, it's usually from the male perspective, not from the woman's perspective, if she's the only woman friend in that group. And so I kind of tried to think about like the commonalities between men, whether they're queer, whether they're straight. And I think one thing that stood out is that toxic masculinity can always kind of go unchecked. That's not to say that every man is toxic, but that is to say that there is kind of this covert way that it can operate. And a lot of times women are in friendships like that. And I've been in friendships like that. So I think it was really just getting to the core of like what I can pull from my own personal experiences and then creating something completely new that has like a cohesive like theme to it.
I really loved, especially in your film, like with the music and kind of playing an industry and being like, this is really something that people deal with and bringing that to light. Did you find anything challenging in telling that story from the female point of view? Or were you just like, you know what? No, people need to know that this really happens. And how did you?
Yeah, I think, well, one, it was kind of came naturally because I did used to make music and I have navigated a lot of those spaces and have had similar experiences. I think the biggest vulnerability is like wanting to tell a very balanced story. And especially when you're writing and going into directing, you don't want to judge your characters, even though it's hard to do that when you have characters that are very toxic. So trying to find a balance between that was really challenging. And then I really had to like step outside of my female perspective and get a male perspective on it. And I talked to a lot of men and they're like, no, I know dudes like this. I know dudes like this. And so that was really like affirming for me.
Perfect. And then Lauren?
Yeah, so with Sincerely Your Friend, I started writing at least a storyline a few years ago, and I just always wanted to have that inside dialogue just brought to life and brought to, people so they can relate to it. And during this time, I actually, like my older sister goes through mental health challenges and she deals with like anxiety and depression and stuff. So when COVID hit, that was my first time coming home. And actually, because I went away to school, I came home and that was the first time I was home for a long period of time in about 4 years. So being home, that anxiety and like everything going on in the world, it really hit her in a different way. And that was the first time I've ever seen her like fully deal with it and not be able to control like her emotions and what she was going through. So it was very eye-opening. And as I was rewriting it, I actually interviewed her for this film because I wanted to get like, better point of view, firsthand point of view of what she genuinely is going through. So when she gave me her answers, it was very beautifully written. It was very powerful. And it did, it kind of stops you in your tracks being like her little sister and seeing her in that way. So her words were actually the entire dialogue of the film. I used her exact words for that dialogue. And it was literally like her words, her talking to me, her family, her friends. And that vulnerability really kind of hit all of us at once because, sometimes you don't know if they're holding back or if they want to say this and they don't, and they're just dealing with a lot more than what we expect. So it was just a really powerful piece of just not only like she was open enough to lend her voice and she was okay with that. And she loved that people were able to relate to it because I've been to panels and they would come up to me and say, hey, this is exactly how I felt, 2 years ago or 5 years ago. And so it was definitely a challenge, just like diving and talking to my sister in that sort of way and just revealing her story. But yeah, that's kind of that personal connection to the story, is like just seeing it just through her eyes, through my eyes, and being able to bring it to life. It really put a different perspective on everything.
It sounds like it was just time, right? Like it was
Yeah.
like, I need it. Now's the time to do this.
Right. And I mean, especially in this day and age, we don't talk about it enough. We don't talk about it in the Black community. And, you know, my mother is Caribbean. We don't talk about it in the Caribbean community. So it was definitely something that we needed to say with our chest and like, say, this is real. You know, people are going through this and this is what they need. Because I think when I saw her going through that during COVID, I didn't know what to do. That was the main thing. Like, I didn't know how to help or what I should be saying to her, what I should be doing. So this is more of that, you know, that letter of saying like, okay, you may not have to understand, but this is like something that may help your friend, your sister, you know, since, like just writing a letter. Yeah.
Love it. Oh my goodness, so good. And then Ayush, same question for you. And I hope I'm saying your name right. If I'm not, please correct me because I am big on getting everybody's names proper. So yeah, can you give me a little bit more information about that for you? Like, you're dealing with, and I love how you told the story, even it was animated, right? Like parts of it were animated, part of it was like live action. So can you give kind of that information of what you were thinking as far as like vulnerability, what you wanted to share, what you didn't want to share? How did you overcome that?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. And so that was an absolute challenge. Coming from, well, you know, Sneh had the genesis of the story with her because it was first a short story in her anthology, and then she wrote the screenplay. And just in that adaptation, I think she took a big risk in literally doing an adaptation and not just, hey, this is the thing in screenplay format. So there was like a major shift in scenes that were removed because we did realize that there is a harder limit to how graphic you can be with film because you can see everything. Because every, you know, and with the story is something where we took a lot of decisions on, you know, where does fantasy and where does realism meet? And the realism, you know, is also has to be an emotional realism. And where vulnerability comes in to that is really working with the actors to bring that truth out, regardless of, you know, what's the animation pipeline, what's the VFX pipeline, because there is an emotional truth to what Sneh has written. And so one thing that's interesting is that it's a story from her perspective, but then the character that we see the story through is a man. And so I think what we really had to do in that was to figure out where is this guy from, what's his story, you know, where is which was something that Sneh provided in the book. But what we really had to look at was that vulnerability of I'm going to talk about Sid, the male character first, and talk about the rest. But with his character, it was this vulnerability of like, how am I going to make this rite of passage happen? Right, that's his nervousness. And then with the vulnerability with the sex worker that he meets, that's presented more when he sort of embodies her experience later. But it's really something that came out of conversations with the actors about, you know, what does your first time mean when it's consensual? What does your first time mean when it's not consensual? Right? How does it feel? How would it feel to live in this space? Even when we did motion capture, even though we didn't have LED walls, we put up huge printouts of what it's like to be in that red light district for the actors, because they couldn't join us on the location scouts. But I did ask them to go through a lot of the research material we collated, because it's horrific. It is horrific. What's happened in that red light district. And so, you know, a great example would be the photo essay Mary Ellen Mark made called Falkland Road. And I think when you enter that space, either through lived research or through viewing research, that vulnerability becomes more you need to do that research to the point where it's more felt rather than understood. And once you feel it, then the actor tells you, yes, I'm ready. Then the director says, okay, I can see what the writer's trying to say in this film. And I think at the end of the day, why I'm taking so long to find words for it is finally it was something that once you feel it, you're like, okay, I'm feeling uncomfortable and vulnerable as we're processing the story. I think we're ready to film.
I love that. I think that people experience film, right? It's not just something that you're doing. You're creating an emotion, you're creating an experience, you're letting people in on something that you're seeing, and all the films did that. So I do want to talk about how you knew what to keep, what not to keep, what you wanted to say, because again, this is short, right? So it's a lot different than if you had more time. So for those of you that feel comfortable sharing, what was your process of kind of knowing what you wanted to keep and what you felt like? I'm sure there were scenes that you were like, you know what, I don't know if this is the place. Maybe I can take this out and still say what I need to say. Does anybody have an example of that or anything they want to share?
I do. I actually had a scene that I completely cut, like a transition scene of Mel taking the journey from the Bronx to Brooklyn, because I really wanted to establish her kind of in this world. There's like a moment where she kind of gets catcalled, and there was a couple of reasons why I took that out. One, it felt a little bit too episodic because the film is already kind of on the longer side, but it made it feel more episodic. And two, it didn't really add anything to the overall, like the heart of the story. This was my very first film. I edited the film. And so I learned a lot in post-production and learning how to like not be too precious about, what you wrote on the page and making sure that it stays with the whole story all the way through, and just having a little bit of flexibility to see things differently.
Anyone else? Yeah, Jenny.
I think that one of the things I was really proud of with our team was how not precious we were. There were a couple times that as the writer, I felt like, okay, well, this is like these punchlines have got to stay. But if actors turned to me and said, like, this just it's not coming out organically, like we really were pretty flexible with that. And I think, I don't know, I felt like knowing going into it, like, okay, I want to use the actual words from the correspondence that I maintained with my actual therapist as part of these letters. But beyond that, the idea that best serves the story is the idea that should win. And I think like going into it with that mentality was helpful.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I didn't have too much to cut for my film. It was definitely like I had a very small crew. I mean, it was one character. We used my apartment. So we definitely utilized our resources. I will say there were some like words that I had to cut out, of course, just to keep the film moving and not to be repetitive. And I just wanted it to flow, as in like, kind of wrap it up all in a bow to like give people the resources at the end that I posted, resources of who to go to when they are feeling a certain way. But no, I think surprisingly, all my films, I always end up cutting something out. So I'm surprised we didn't cut anything out in this film.
Aish, or any of your team, anything that you want to add?
Yeah, Sneh, Wasim, if you guys have any thoughts.
Yeah, I would love to just say that one of the first places where we sent our film, they disqualified us for the graphic content. That was a great feeling. To be disqualified at the first place where you sent your film to. But from there on, it's been great. But it's fantastic, guys. Like Ayushmann said, this is based on a book by Sneh. I'm gonna patch the link in our chat whenever you guys have time to take a look. It's fantastic, and these are really fierce stories. And as a producer, what really got me hooked on was that I was just coming out of Love, Death, Robots, in essence, in life, in this space. So you know how you are in your world of stories, right? And being based in India, I had read many versions of what would be a reimagined Love, Death, Robot, but nothing unique. It would still be a version of what I had seen in the originals. And then scan through it's like, back in the day, I remember when I grew up, I tell people, Evil Dead was a horror film that came out It came out before we were like about the time, but when I was growing up. And then every horror film for the next 5 years was a version of Evil Dead. No matter which country you went to, if you were in India, if you were in Europe, we all had Evil Deads. That one house, 4 friends, and that story. So after Love, Death, Robots, I saw a lot of Love, Death, Robot versions in India, but I couldn't put my finger on anything and say, wow, this feels real. And then we came across Sneha's book, which also is a crazy story how it got us. And then I read it and I was in love with it. I was like, we've got to make this. And then that uphill task started. The dream had taken off, but the real work had to happen. And by a stroke of luck, met Ayush, had met him for something else, started talking about this. Both of us were equally excited. Sneha, anyways, is the fire in our bellies. So she made sure she kept on pushing us through. And it was just a mad journey, literally. We were fighting technology and money both. But I think at the end of it, we tried to, I think I'm very happy, you know, I mean, there's always scope for improvement and we are always will be the first ones to acknowledge that. But within the amount of time and given the resources that we had, it made us happy. And I'm glad that that's a feeling we got, that we're happy with the film.
Amazing. Amazing. First time filmmakers, who here had their debut? I want to see. Yes. Okay. Well, you're the only one, which is cool because I'm going to pinpoint you right now and just ask you, was there anything challenging? Let's actually rephrase that. Anything surprising that you learned through this process that you'll keep in mind for your next film?
I feel like I learned a lot. I feel that it's a very humbling process because you can put your best foot forward. And then when you have the final product, there's still always like the creative mind in me that's like, oh, this could be different. That could be different. I would do this differently. But I think one thing that I will take with me for sure is just to have a healthy detachment to feedback, good or bad. You know, I'm learning, I think, through this process, how to take what I need and leave the rest. And what I need doesn't have to be something that serves my ego, but that serves the story. So I think that was my biggest learning.
Amazing. For those of you that have done this before, what was something on this particular film that surprised you or that was something you didn't expect? And how did you handle it, right? Because we've got filmmakers that are going to be watching this in the future. It's not everybody on right now. So anything that you want to share, I think is going to be really helpful to those that are looking up to you after watching these films.
I think for me, this was the first film I had where I had a character that was going through something really emotional. And I had to, although I wasn't directing, I had to, you know, take time out of the schedule to allow the actress to get into character, kind of feel the emotions. So that was definitely something different. I've always been on a very like lighthearted, you know, set, quirky comedy type stuff. So it was very like, okay, everyone needs to be in the zone. Like, even if you're behind the camera, don't laugh, like, because they have to, you know, stay focused. So I even after this film came out or after I shot it, I did end up directing for the first time. And it was like, okay, I'm understanding it a lot more as a producer, as a writer. It helps to see directors at work as well as actors. And it allows me, you know, to look at the schedule, see what works and what I need to allocate for that scene specifically. Because it's not just going out and shooting it, but you have to allow the actress to get into their zone and put forth like their best performance. So that was a very fun experience, just like seeing my actress like that. I've worked with her a bunch of times and this was the most serious piece of work we've done together. So yeah, I truly enjoyed it. It was great seeing, you know, her in that form, in that state of mind, and then switching it and doing another project with her where she's all like, oh, happy and ditzy and stuff.
Like setting the tone, right? The atmosphere, the environment, knowing that you're part of that as like a filmmaker, right? When you pull yourself out and like you said, now you're directing, so you're running kind of that emotion. So that
it makes it a lot easier for the actress if everyone else is on that same page.
Yeah. Wow, yeah, that's a good point. What about you, Jenny, Ayush, Wasim, anybody?
Oh, no, no, please go ahead.
You guys are so polite. I love it. Okay, go ahead, Jenny.
I was gonna say, I think one thing that really surprised me was how difficult location scouting was. We lost locations so many times. And, as soon as I say that to filmmakers, I get these nod, everyone's like, oh God, yeah, it's terrible. But I didn't know that. This is, it's not my first film, but it's my first film with a, 15-person crew and a cast and, with funding behind it. So that was tricky. I think the thing I learned was just in having to navigate this as like we're all wearing multiple hats, right? And so I think I got so lucky with the director and the cinematographer on my team because they said to me, because I was also starring in it, the day before they were like, anything from this moment forward that comes through, text it to us, we will delegate it. That is not your job for the next 4 or 5 days of shooting. Like, this is your only job. We will take care of this. And so I think that like just making sure that you have people on your team that allow you to give the performance if you are wearing that hat, I think is really critical. And I also think, you're always going to go over budget. So I think it's more a priority, like just prioritizing where you're going to go over budget. We ended up adding art direction and a first AD, and I don't know how we could have done what we did without them. So yeah, was it it wasn't $5, but like it was completely worth it. So I think it's just kind of figuring out like where you want to stretch a little bit.
Mm-hmm. It's wise. Ayush, anything that you definitely found surprising in this particular film?
Yeah,
I could tell by your face. Okay.
Yeah, it was all of our first time working with photoreal animation that's rendered in a game engine in real time. And I think, the challenge is one, it's not going to look like the live action version you would intuitively imagine in your head, right? Things are going to change. And then as you start the process, you're going to realize some things that you take for granted in live action are going to be harder with motion capture, specifically physical contact, right? You have to really plan for that in motion capture. If actors are kissing or holding hands, it occludes the sensors, and which is fine for most situations. Our film is about a guy who loses his virginity in a brothel. So there is going to be physical contact. But anyway, I think what happens, the larger picture from that is you're going to have all this stuff that are unexpected problems. And, one thing that I've taken away is like this process, this directing process in any film, it's not about realizing your vision. It's not that sort of pop culture thing of, hey, this one guy, he has a vision, it's created. You're collaborating with people with the impracticalities of the real world to make something better than what you envisioned, right? Because you're never going to get what you want, which is fine. And that's great because you're going to come up with something better because you're working with other people who are better at their jobs than you are. Like, I can't sit and compose the music the way, I imagine in my head. And even if I could, it's not going to be as good as working with the composer we worked with, right? Same thing for, working with a producer, with a screenwriter, with other actors. So it's really about superseding what you imagined by trusting the people you work with to come up with something better because they know their jobs better than you know their jobs.
I love that. I love that so much. I will say The Last Block had the exact same answer. There was somebody who had almost specifically the same answer because it is a collaborative process. And if you're not used to sharing that, kind of letting down the ego and saying, you know what, I'm just going to accept the fact that you know what you're doing and we're going to make something beautiful and you come along with me on this journey. I think like that's where the synergy comes, right? When everybody's on the same team. So that's great. Okay. That's amazing. You guys are making my job very simple. So then my next one is the biggest advice, which of course is something that we want to share with the people that are watching this, because either they've watched your film at this point or they're going to. So just thinking about the biggest advice that you were given or advice that you want to give somebody else about making a short film. Okay, people are smiling, but I'm going to go ahead and just call out names. Lauren, let's go. Let's go. What do you have? And then we'll come to Snee.
So the biggest advice I can give is to find your, I guess I say find your tribe or find your community. I was blessed enough to move to LA and find a community of friends, and we happen to be all in the same career field. So like all my close friends are actors, writers, producers, directors. So find people who genuinely want to create and want to build their own portfolio, so it doesn't feel like you're asking them for like a favor. Like you both, it's a teamwork, it's teamwork all together. So find those people that are like, hey, I want to try composing or try editing and work together to create something, because at the end of the day, when you say you're a filmmaker, you want to have something to show. And I think it helps when you have a beautiful group of friends that want to create too. And I think it also helps with set camaraderie and set environment, because I make it a purpose to have a very like chill and also a very great set. And I want people to genuinely enjoy being there. And also I want people to be doing what they enjoy doing. So I always ask like my crew members, hey, is this what you actually want to do? Do you want to do scripty? Is that like your passion? Because when you're having fun on set, you know, the film ends up being fun. And I've always heard horror stories about people on set. So I I make it a point not to have that type of environment. And just, yeah, when you're creating with friends, it just feels like you're at like summer camp. So it doesn't always feel like you're working. It feels like you're just creating magic. And filmmaking is just like we were all little kids once, and filmmaking is just like we're making up stories for fun. Like how, like that's the best thing to do. So find your community, create just to have fun. And I think what helps in independent filmmaking is that you're kind of creating unapologetically. There's no guidelines by like a big studio or anything telling you to do this, do that. So have fun while doing it.
Amazing.
Thank you.
All right. I love it. Snee, I saw you pop on. Hey.
Actually, I just wanted to add to what she's saying. I think
Yeah.
like finding yourself a good producer and finding someone who cares about like what you're the stuff you're like the stuff you're making up. You know, I saw this film, Ode to Procrastination. I think it was in this group. I'm not
Mhm.
sure,
Mhm.
but it really hit home, because I think at least as a writer, that's half your life. You know, you're just living in this little bubble of yours in which you're going to write this and this is going to happen and then that is going to happen. And then you meet a team of people who also see it like that. And then you figure out the real world workings of it. And I think that's so to find yourself a team that also procrastinates on the side and then gets down to doing the job. I think that's really important.
I love that you allowed room for procrastination. For those of us that are
Yeah.
perfectionists, we're like, well, but yeah, no, that was
You
good.
got to procrastinate if you got to work.
I love it. You're like, let's be real. All right. Jenny and Lachelle, whatever one who wants to go first.
I would say, just to add on to Lauren's idea of, you know, find your tribe, which I think is so critical. I would also say, make sure your tribe can be honest with you and that you can accept that honesty. That like felt like a critical piece of our process, that just, you know, in terms of like taking the ego out of it, that people feel like you've created a safe enough space to either say, I don't know the answer to that question, or I don't think this is the way we should go, and have that be okay. The other thing I would say too, that I'm kind of discovering through the process this time around, is it's not done once you like screen the film for your private like friends and family. Like the whole film festival process is kind of its own new journey. And I think that that was a place where I was grateful that I had people to look to for guidance and help, and just kind of figuring out like the marketing of a short film. And is it a spec for a feature? Is it just its own thing? Is it a calling card for the next thing you're going to do? And so I think not to, you know, you don't want to like sit down in front of a blank Word document and like be thinking about that already. But I do think it's something, when you zoom out to see the big picture, that is important to, you know, just set aside energy to think about.
I love it. Lachelle?
I would say always remain teachable is really important. For me, I didn't go to film school, so like I was completely a noob. And I think that knowing that I was going into this, having a lot to learn, actually was very liberating, because it allowed the space for me to not have it be completely perfect. And also like even when I'm like collaborating with like my actors who have more film experience than me, I think approaching it in a way where I understand, like they understand that craft in a way better than I do. So if I'm confused about a scene with a character that I wrote, and like if it's believable or not, like being honest about that, because I think people can tell when you're faking it, and just really commit to the craft. I don't think that ever stops. I feel like I'm obsessively like to study the craft, and that's just something that you just have to keep doing and commit to.
Amazing. You guys are great. I love all the films. Everybody should go watch. I know I'm plugging it in the middle of what we're doing, but we've got 2 minutes left. So really quickly, we're also going to share how you can reach these filmmakers in just a second. But first, does anybody have any further plans for their films? Like Jenny touched on it. It was a question I had. You guys were just drawing out the questions I already had. What would you like to be doing next with their films? Are there next steps, or what are you up to next? Let's just leave it at that. So we can start with Jenny first, actually, on that one.
Sure. Well, I mean, hooray for the SAG strike being over, but of course, or not the SAG, I'm sorry.
WGA. Well, you're calling it SAG. It's going to happen. Prophetic. Go ahead. Yes.
But yeah, so I mean, right now in this moment, actually, I am immersed in a Edgar Allan Poe adapted play, returning to my stage roots. So yeah, but I mean, I think I don't know whether this will become a feature. We've had producers approach us about that. It's something that's, it's never off the table. But yeah, we'll finish out the film festival circuit and then just kind of see where we go from there.
Awesome. Michelle, Lauren.
So this was the end of my film festival circuit for Sincerely Your Friend. The goal is to get it in front of schools and like PBS type programs to work it as a, public service announcement. And I personally just finished shooting my first web series. So I'm kind of like in the post area with that. And my brain is like, but that is what I'm working on right now.
Ayush?
So we all know that Sneh wrote an anthology, and Wasim and Sneh imagined this as, this is going to be this whole anthology of magical creatures in Mumbai's underbelly. And I was very lucky to join them. So yeah, I mean, I think that would be amazing. And that's one of the few positive gifts from the streaming space is you can have an anthology of like 10 animated shorts that are 7 minutes long. One is 15 minutes long. One is, and it's just, maybe I should hand off to them because this project really started with Sneh and Wasim. But I hope to be part of it because it's just, I think what they're attempting is so brave and so daring that, even if I never made this film, I would be like, man, I want to see this entire book on screen. So Sneh, Wasim, whatever thoughts you guys have.
Well, I'm just like, we have 9 more stories to go. That's the only so we're gonna go all out trying to make them. We're definitely gonna stick with this. I've sent the link for the book, guys. Whenever you get a chance to take a look, scan through it. It's a really, really cool read. And we're so positive about it that I feel that it can make a language of its own. So we're right now in that world, but we're figuring it out. But at the same time, we're also approaching it in the right way, because while we were working on Kamathipura, we realized that we worked I've done 7 films in live action and a couple of series and a bunch of things. So this was the first step into animation, and I am very methodical with live action. And I realized that that's baby steps in animation. I needed to bump up my methodical skills up here. And in live action, if you check on something, a verbal confirmation is okay. But for anybody who's stepping into animation, go for the previs, ask for everything to be shown to you. Nothing should be left to, I'll take a look at it later. Nothing. Because at the end of the day, even if everything is right, the system will crash. So you've got to fight against all odds. And everything needs to be seen. Nothing can be left to hearsay. It'll be done is not okay. It has to be done, and you have to see it, and then only you can move to the next step.
Love it.
That's the one thing I learned.
Practical advice. And then for Lachelle?
I'm working on my next short. I'm going to stay in the short lane for a little bit as I'm growing as a director. It is a 90s era coming of age short about an 8-year-old girl who helps host her teenage sister's baby shower. That is loosely based on my real life. And I'm hoping to shoot that sometime next year.
Awesome. All right, guys, we're going to bring it home with how people can get in touch with you. And then we're going to say bye to everybody watching us. So, Lachelle, we'll go back to you and say how everybody can find you. And then I'm going to move through.
You can find me at.
Why was there a heart on Ayush's page? I could see a heart floating around on your window, Ayush.
Oh, sorry. No. That's a heart like in support of Lachelle's story. That she was
Yeah, I was like, why is this heart coming and going? What's going on? Okay, got it. Thanks.
All right,
Sorry about
Lachelle. Sorry, let's go ahead and get your contact info out there for everybody.
You can find me at LachelleChrisan.co. I'm on Instagram at Lachelle Rising, and my production company is on Instagram at 88 Hughes.
Okay, Lauren.
You
You
can find
call yourself. You were like,
Yeah. It's like, oh, no. You can find me on Instagram, Loren_Maxine. My production company is a LorenMaxineProduction.com, or on Instagram, a Loren Maxine Production on Instagram.
awesome. Ayush.
So, you can find me. Wow. I've never thought of answering this question in my life. You can find me at you can find
If
me
you're
at Ayushmann.
comfortable. If you're
Yeah, yeah.
comfortable. Yeah, if you don't want to, it's fine. No problem.
No, that's fine. You can you can look for me on Vimeo. That's Ayushmann Pandey. That's AAYUSHMANPANDEY. And my email is ayushmann.pandey@gmail.com if you want to just chat about the film, or if you have work stuff. And then Wasim has shared his info. That's openairfilms.com and Wasim and Open Air Films. And then there's Sneh at live.in. And our Instagram is
It's misspelled though. It's a typo.
It's in the okay, yeah, that's fine. It's the Instagram is, if you go at the film Kamathipura, you can find us there. And yeah, we this is great because that's our only way of hearing back from our audiences. So please be in touch if you feel like it.
Awesome. And Jenny, bringing it home.
Sorry about that, guys. My computer crashed, and I was like, oh, well, this is exciting. So you can find our film at dearsimone.film on Instagram, which is the best place to kind of follow our adventures. You can reach me personally at jenny@jennypearsall.com, and our fabulous director, Kevin Deming, at hello@kevindeming.com.
Perfect. All right, guys, we're going to say bye to the audience now. Everybody watching, thank you for taking time out of your day, and we will hopefully all come together soon. We'll see all these people